It wasn't the lie that broke her. It was the applause. In the gilded world of Manhattan's elite, Everick and Alina Winscott were the ultimate power couple, a tech billionaire, and his brilliant, beautiful, and very pregnant wife. Their life was a carefully curated masterpiece. But when a single damning receipt appeared, the masterpiece began to crack. What followed was not just a quiet heartbreak, but a cold, calculated war. This is the story of how a woman pushed to the edge, refused to be a victim, and instead orchestrated a public spectacle so devastating it brought an entire empire to its knees. The penthouse at 15 Central Park West was less of a home and more of a statement. It was a silent testament to the dizzying success of Everick Winscott, a man who had wrestled the digital world into submission and emerged a billionaire before his 40th birthday. Every surface was polished marble or gleaming chrome. Every piece of art was a conversation starter, and every window offered a godlike view of the city he considered his kingdom. And in the heart of this kingdom was his queen, Alina Winscott. At 34, Alina was more than just a beautiful accessory to Everick's wealth. With a degree in art history from Yale and a lineage that traced back to old New York money, she possessed a quiet intelligence and a steely grace that the city's fawning socialites could only imitate. Now 7 months pregnant with their first child, a son, they knew her body was changing, but her composure remained absolute. The pregnancy, however, had not been easy. It was classified as a high-risk, a delicate condition that had forced Alina to retreat from her position on the board of the Met and confined her to a life of quiet observation. It was in this forced stillness that she first began to notice the cracks. It started subtly. A scent on Everick's Tom Ford suit jacket when he came home late from a bored dinner. It wasn't the stale cigar smoke of his usual associates or the familiar, cloying perfumes of their wives. It was something younger, sweeter. Joe Malone's peony and blush suede. A scent Alina recognized from the gaggle of junior assistants at his company Winscott Innovations. She had dismissed it. A hug, a handshake, the proximity of a crowded elevator. Then came the late nights, more frequent than ever. The excuses were plausible, of course. A server farm crisis in Virginia, a hostile takeover bid from a competitor in Silicon Valley, a last-minute flight to London to soothe anxious investors. Everick was a man who moved the world, and the world was a demanding mistress. He would return at 3 a.m., smelling of expensive whiskey and exhaustion, kissing her forehead, with lips that felt strangely disconnected from the man she knew. "Don't wait up for me, Elle." He'd murmur, his voice a low thrum of apology. "It's a beast right now. Just a few more weeks and I'm all yours. Ours." He'd place a hand on her swollen belly, a gesture that once thrilled her, but now felt like a performance. The first real, undeniable splinter of suspicion lodged itself in her heart on a Tuesday. Everick was supposedly in Chicago, closing a deal. Alina was struggling with insomnia, her mind a frantic carousel of baby names and birth plans. At 2:17 a.m., she padded into their cavernous walk-in closet to fetch an extra pillow. Everick's travel valet case, which was supposed to be with him, was sitting on his mahogany dresser. A careless oversight. A cold dread washed over her. Her hand trembled as she unzipped it. Inside, nestled among his neatly folded shirts, was the folio for their American Express black card. She never looked at the statements. Everick's business manager, a stern man named Mr. Abernathy, handled everything. But a single receipt had slipped out, lying face up. It wasn't for a steak dinner at Gibson's in Chicago, or a suite at the Peninsula. It was a charge from a boutique hotel in a part of Manhattan they never frequented Soho, the Serafina Hotel, for a junior suite. The charge was dated 2 weeks prior, on a night Everick was supposed to have been working late at his office, just a few blocks from their home. Alina sank onto a velvet ottoman, the receipt feeling like a shard of ice in her hand. It wasn't the money. It was the geography. The lie. The Serafina wasn't a place for business meetings. It was a place for secrets, with its discreet entrance and rooms designed for illicit romance. Her mind reeled back. 2 weeks ago. A Wednesday. He had come home smelling of rain and that same sweet perfume. He'd told her he'd been caught in a downpour after a meeting, ran late, forced to share a cab with his assistant. It had all sounded so reasonable then. Now it sounded like a script. She put the receipt back, zipped the case, and returned to bed. She lay there, her body rigid, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The baby kicked a sudden sharp reminder of the life they were supposed to be building together. For the first time, Alina Winscott felt a terrifying primal rage build within her. She was not a fool. She was not a woman to be placated with diamonds and empty gestures. She was a partner, a mother-to-be, and she would not have her life, her family dismantled by a cheap lie and a secret hotel room in Soho. Sleep was impossible. As the sun began to cast a grey dawn over the city, Alina made a decision. She would not cry. She would not scream. She would gather facts. She would become her own investigator. The art historian in her knew that to understand a masterpiece, you had to study every brushstroke, every layer of paint, every hidden detail. Her marriage, her life was her masterpiece, and she was about to uncover its forgery. The next morning, Alina moved with a chilling, newfound purpose. When Everick called from Chicago, his voice oozing with a practiced affection that now sounded grotesque to her, she was the perfect wife. She asked about the deal, feigned a sleepy yawn, and told him she loved him. Each word was a carefully chosen weapon, a piece of camouflage for the war she was now waging in secret. "Love you more, Elle. The jet's on the tarmac. I'll be home in time to kiss you good night," he'd said. "I'll be waiting," she replied, her voice as smooth as glass. After the call, her work began. She didn't start with his phone or computer. That was amateurish. Everick was a tech mogul. His digital security would be a fortress. She started with the one thing even he couldn't fully digitize his ego. Her first stop was her laptop, not in their shared office, but in the sun-drenched breakfast nook, a place he associated with her reading gardening magazines. She began with the name of the hotel, the Serafina. She studied its website, its clientele, its press. It was exactly as she'd feared, a haven for the wealthy and discreet, known for its no-questions-asked policy. Then she moved on to the more complex task, the American Express account. Everick had given her a supplementary card, but she had never used the online portal. She knew his business manager, Abernathy, had primary access. Getting past him would be impossible. But what about the supplementary account? Her account. She went to the Amex website and clicked Forgot Password, entering her card details. The security question popped up. What is the name of your first pet? A wave of nostalgia, sharp and painful, hit her. It was a golden retriever named Winston. They had gotten together in the first year of their marriage. Everick had cried the day he died. The memory felt like a betrayal. She typed Winston, access granted. Her heart hammered against her ribs as the portal loaded. She clicked on Statements. There, in crisp PDF format, were the last 12 months of her supplementary cards activity, which was nothing. She never used it. But the portal gave her another option: view all account activity. She clicked it. A list of transactions appeared, both his and hers. Her breath hitched. She wasn't just looking at a statement. She was looking at the secret diary of her husband's life. She scrolled past the multi-thousand-dollar charges at Ethelred's for business dinners, the payments to NetJets, the endless stream of money that fueled their life. She was looking for anomalies, small charges that would fly under the radar of a business manager looking for major fraud. A $200 charge at a florist in a neighborhood they never went to. Multiple charges for Ubers that didn't start or end at their home or his office. And then she found it. A recurring charge, once every 2 weeks for the last 4 months. A payment of $450 to a CJ Art Advisory. It was coded as professional services. It was just small enough to be an insignificant business expense, a consultation perhaps, but it was the consistency that caught her eye. It was too regular. A quick Google search for CJ Art Advisory brought up a sleek, minimalist website. The founder, sole proprietor, and chief curator was a woman named Chloe Jensen. The About page featured a photograph of her. She was young, maybe 27, with sharp, intelligent eyes, a sweep of dark hair, and a confident smile. She was standing in front of a large, abstract canvas, looking every bit the ambitious, chic New Yorker. The website listed her gallery address. It was in Chelsea. Alina felt a cold certainty settle in her bones. This was her. This was the woman who wore peony and blush suede. But she needed more than a recurring payment. A business relationship, however unlikely, was still deniable. She needed to link Chloe Jensen to Everick personally, incontrovertibly. Her mind, trained to find patterns and connections in art, now applied that same skill to infidelity. She remembered a charity gala they had attended 5 months ago, the Art for Tomorrow benefit. Everick had been a major sponsor. She pulled up the event's web page, scrolling through the photo gallery, and there he was, Everick smiling with his arm around a beaming Chloe Jensen. The caption read, "Event benefactor Everick Winscott, with gallery owner Chloe Jensen, who curated tonight's successful auction." In the photo, Chloe was looking at Everick with an expression of pure, unadulterated adoration. Everick, in turn, was looking at the camera, but his body was angled toward her, a subtle intimacy in their posture that Alina, in her blissful ignorance that night, had completely missed. The pieces were clicking into place. The meeting, the art advisory payments as a cover, the secret hotel stays. Alina's next step was bolder. She needed to see Chloe's life, her habits. Using a name she'd used for anonymous auction bidding in the past, Helena Vane, she created a new Instagram account. It was a ghost account, no profile picture, no followers. She searched for Chloe Jensen. Her profile was public. It was a gallery of a life lived for an audience. Chloe at gallery openings. Chloe sipping rosé at a rooftop bar in the meatpacking district. Chloe on a weekend trip to the Hamptons. Alina scrolled back through months of posts, her eyes scanning for any sign of Everick. He was too smart to appear in a photo, but his presence was there like a ghost. A photo of Chloe's wrist, adorned with a delicate gold bracelet. A Cartier Love bracelet. Alina felt a chill. She herself had the same one, a 3rd anniversary gift from Everick. Was it a coincidence, or was it a sick, twisted signature of his affection? Then she saw it. A post from 2 weeks ago. Chloe holding a coffee cup, sitting in a sunlit cafe. The caption read, "Soho mornings are my favorite, caffeine, hushed city life hatch inspiration. In the reflection of the large window behind her, barely visible, but there, if you knew what you were looking for, was the distinctive awning of the Serafina Hotel, and reflected in her sunglasses, a distorted but recognizable image of a man's silhouette, a man with Everick Winscott's broad shoulders and characteristic posture. Alina took a screenshot, zooming in until the pixels blurred. It was him. She closed the laptop, her body trembling not with weakness, but with a terrifying crystalline rage. The silent investigation was over. She had the who, the what, the where, the when. She had the proof circumstantial but overwhelming. Now came the question of how. How to use this information. A quiet divorce, a screaming confrontation in their sterile penthouse. No. That was too simple. That would let them control the narrative, paint her as hysterical emotional, the spurned pregnant wife. She thought of Chloe Jensen's public Instagram, her curated life, her carefully constructed image as a rising star in the art world. An image Alina suspected that was funded by her husband. An image that was built on the foundations of her own broken trust. A plan began to form in Alina's mind, cold and intricate as a spider's web. The art world was built on reputation, on authenticity, on the story behind the art. Alina decided she would not just expose the affair. She would turn Chloe's own world against her. She would make the stage for Chloe's greatest triumph, the upcoming spring gala at her own gallery, the scene of her utter annihilation. And she would do it in a way that would leave no doubt as to who held the power. For the next 3 weeks, Alina played the part of her life. She was the serene, glowing mother-to-be. She discussed nursery colors with Everick, allowed him to rest his hand on her stomach, to feel the baby kick, and smiled lovingly at him over dinners at Daniel and Jean-Georges restaurants, where their presence was noted and photographed. She was weaving the final threads of their public image into a tapestry of domestic bliss, knowing she was about to set the entire thing on fire. Indeed, she was a general preparing for battle. Her first move was to secure her flank. She scheduled a discreet lunch with her oldest friend, Beatrice Shaw, a partner at a top-tier divorce law firm. They met at a quiet corner table at La Grenouille, a place so steeped in old-world decorum that no one would dare eavesdrop. "You look radiant, Elle," Beatrice said, her sharp lawyer's eyes missing nothing. "But tired." Alina didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Everick is having an affair." She said it calmly, the words tasting like poison. Beatrice didn't gasp or offer platitudes. She simply nodded, her expression hardening. "Okay," she said. "Tell me everything." Alina laid it all out. The perfume, the hotel receipt, the Amex statements, the CJ art advisory, the photograph from the gala, the Instagram post. She presented her evidence with the dispassionate clarity of a prosecutor. Beatrice listened intently, her fork pausing over her Dover sole. When Alina finished, she took a slow sip of water. "The evidence is compelling but circumstantial. His lawyer, and it will be a shark from a firm like mine, will call it a series of unfortunate coincidences. They'll say you're a hormonal, paranoid pregnant woman." "I know," Alina said, "which is why a quiet confrontation is out of the question. I need something irrefutable, something public." "What are you planning, Alina?" Beatrice asked, a note of concern in her voice. "Don't do anything that could jeopardize your position. The Winscott prenup is notoriously tough." "I read it again last night," Alina replied, her voice steely. "The infidelity clause is specific. It requires indisputable proof of intimate relations. A photograph, a confession. Anything less, and I walk away with a fraction of what I'm entitled to, what our son is entitled to." So you need to trap him, Beatrice stated. Not just him, Alina corrected. Her, Chloe Jensen. He's insulated by layers of wealth and power. She isn't. Her reputation is her only real currency. Alina then laid out her plan, the one that had been crystallizing in her mind for weeks. The annual Chelsea Contemporary Gala was being held at Chloe's gallery in 10 days. Everick and Alina were the chairs of the event, their names printed at the top of the invitation. It was the biggest night of Chloe's professional life. Beatrice's eyes widened as she listened. That's not just a confrontation, Alina. That's a public execution. She built her career on my husband's money and my broken trust, Alina said, her voice devoid of emotion. I'm simply collecting the debt. You'll need more than the Cartier bracelet, Beatrice warned. He could say he bought it as a gift for a client. I know, Alina said. I need something more personal, something unique, and I think I know how to get it. That evening, Everick came home with a gift. It was a large, flat box from Cartier. For the most beautiful mother-to-be in the world, he said, kissing her. Her heart turned to ice, but she smiled. Inside was a stunning diamond necklace. Everick, it's extravagant. Nothing's too extravagant for you, he said, fastening it around her neck. As he did, she feigned a casual curiosity. You know, darling, she began, her tone light. I was thinking about that little art curator, Chloe Jensen, the one from the benefit. She's so ambitious. We should really do something to support her gallery. Perhaps acquire a piece for the new baby's nursery. Everick stiffened, almost imperceptibly. Oh, I don't know, Elle. Abernathy is already complaining about my spending on art. Nonsense, Alina said, turning to face him, her hand on his chest. We're the chairs of her gala. It would be a wonderful gesture. In fact, I was thinking of something special. You know that emerging artist she represents, a sculptor named Antoine Dubois. He does those beautiful minimalist bronze birds, a fledgling for our little fledgling. It's poetic. She was watching his face carefully, a flicker of panic in his eyes. He knew the artist. Of course he did. Let me think about it, he said a little too quickly. It's a busy week. But Alina had planted the seed. Over the next few days, she nurtured it, mentioning the sculptor again, leaving the artist's catalogue on the coffee table. She was baiting a trap, using her knowledge of Everick's desire to please her, or at least to appear to please her, as the lure. 4 days before the gala, her bait was taken. A courier from the Chloe Jensen Gallery delivered a purchase agreement to the penthouse. It was for a unique bronze sculpture by Antoine Dubois, the fledgling's first flight. The price was a staggering $75,000. It was a ridiculously expensive piece for a nursery, a clear attempt by Everick to appease both his wife and his mistress with a single grand gesture. But Alina's focus was on the document itself. The purchase was made by Winscott Innovations, but the signatory at the bottom approving the acquisition on behalf of the gallery was Chloe Jensen, and scribbled in the margin in Everick's unmistakable handwriting was a short note, Chloe. Thanks for making this happen. A beautiful piece for a beautiful new beginning. J. He must have reviewed and signed it at her gallery. The note was meant for Chloe, a private message hidden on a business document he assumed Alina would never see. It was careless. It was arrogant. And it was exactly the proof she needed. A beautiful new beginning. The words echoed in her mind with venomous irony. He wasn't talking about their baby. He was talking about his new life, a life with Chloe funded by his marital assets. This note, combined with the other evidence, transformed a circumstantial case into a damning indictment. Alina carefully photographed the document with her phone. Then she placed the original in a fireproof safe alongside her passport and the baby's birth plan. The final piece of her plan involved her appearance. She called her personal stylist, a flamboyant man named Stefan. "Stefan, darling," she said, "the Chelsea gala. I need a dress, but not one of my usuals. I don't want to look like a wife. I want to look like a widow. A very rich, very powerful widow." Stefan, intrigued, was silent for a moment. "I have the perfect thing," he said finally. "Valentino. It's black, severe, and utterly magnificent. It will make you look untouchable." "Perfect," Alina said. "Untouchable is exactly what I'm going for." The day of the gala arrived. As she had her hair and makeup done, a sense of calm settled over her. Everick was in his study, taking calls, oblivious. He thought this night was about celebrating art. He had no idea it was about to become his personal judgment day. As they rode down in the elevator, Everick looked at her. Truly. Looked at her for the first time in weeks. The black Valentino gown was a masterpiece of stark elegance, clinging to her bump in a way that was both maternal and formidable. The Cartier diamond necklace he'd just given her was a cold fire at her throat. "Wow, Elle," he said, genuinely impressed. "You look breathtaking, absolutely lethal." Alina met his gaze in the mirrored elevator walls, a small, cold smile playing on her lips. "I'm so glad you think so, darling," she said. "You have no idea." The Chloe Jensen Gallery in Chelsea was electric. The air buzzed with the chatter of art collectors, critics, socialites, and hangers-on, all bathed in the soft glow of expertly placed track lighting. Waiters in crisp white jackets moved silently through the crowd, balancing trays of champagne and canapés. The space, usually a quiet white box for contemplation, had been transformed into a theatre of social ambition. And tonight, Chloe Jensen was its star. She stood near the entrance, radiant in a shimmering silver gown that clung to her slender frame. She was the picture of success, greeting guests with a dazzling smile, her voice confident as she discussed the art on her walls. Her dark hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, revealing the sparkle of a familiar gold bracelet on her wrist, the Cartier love bracelet. When Everick and Alina Winscott arrived, a hush fell over the room, followed by a wave of sycophantic greetings. They were the main event, the patrons, the king and queen of this glittering affair. "Chloe, you've done a magnificent job," Everick said, beaming, placing a proprietary hand on the small of her back for a fraction of a second too long. "The gallery looks incredible." "Everick, Alina, thank you so much for coming, and for everything," Chloe said, her eyes flicking to Alina's baby bump. "Alina, you look absolutely stunning. Motherhood suits you." The compliment was delivered with flawless sincerity, but Alina could see the flicker of triumph in her eyes, the look of a woman who believed she had won. "Thank you, Chloe," Alina replied, her voice placid, betraying none of the tempest raging within her. "It's a special night. I have a feeling it's one we'll all remember for a very long time." She let her eyes drift meaningfully down to the Cartier bracelet on Chloe's wrist before meeting her gaze again. For the first time, Chloe's smile faltered just for a moment. Alina allowed Everick to guide her through the crowd. She played her part with an Oscar-worthy performance, smiling, making small talk about the art, accepting congratulations on the baby. She spoke with the art critic from the New York Times, chatted with a hedge fund manager who was a major collector, and exchanged pleasantries with the wives of Everick's business partners. Every interaction was a strategic move, reinforcing her status, her grace, her position as the unassailable Mrs. Winscott. She saw Everick and Chloe speaking near a large brutalist sculpture. Their heads were close together. He laughed at something she said, and she touched his arm. It was a gesture of casual intimacy, but to Alina it was a lit fuse. She saw Marcus Thorne, Everick's loyal right-hand man, watching them from across the room with a look of deep unease. He knew. Of course he knew. An hour into the event, the gallery director, a nervous man named Philip, tapped a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please." The crowd quieted down. Philip launched into a speech about the importance of new artists and thanked the gallery's supporters. "And now," he concluded, "it is my great honor to introduce the chair of tonight's gala, a woman of impeccable taste and a true champion of the arts, Mrs. Alina Winscott." A polite round of applause filled the gallery. This was the moment. Everick, standing beside her, squeezed her hand. "You'll be great, honey." Alina walked to the small lectern set up in the center of the room. She adjusted the microphone, her eyes sweeping over the sea of expectant faces. She saw Chloe standing near the front, looking proud proprietary. She saw Everick watching her with a placid, supportive smile. She saw the society photographers, their lenses trained on her. She began, her voice calm and clear, resonating through the silent gallery. "Good evening," she said. "Thank you, Philip. It's an honor to be here tonight, surrounded by so much creativity and passion. When we look at the art on these walls, we are asked to consider its meaning, its story. We are asked to value its authenticity." She paused, letting the word hang in the air. Authenticity. It's a quality we prize in art, isn't it? We want to know that what we are seeing is real, that the story it tells is a true one. A forgery, no matter how skillfully executed, is ultimately worthless. Its value is a lie. A few people nodded thoughtfully. Everick's smile remained fixed. Chloe looked on a picture of rapt attention. "Tonight," Alina continued, her voice gaining a harder edge, "I want to tell you a story about acquisition and value, a story about a very valuable collection that was compromised." The atmosphere in the room began to shift. The polite smiles on people's faces were replaced by looks of intense curiosity. This was not the standard bland speech of a wealthy patron's wife. "Imagine a collector," Alina said, her eyes never leaving Chloe's face. "A collector who spent years building a life's work. A partnership. It was a rare and beautiful collection built on trust, history, and shared dreams. But then a new piece was added. A piece that on the surface looked exquisite, young, ambitious, shiny." Everick's smile had now vanished. A look of confusion, then dawning horror, replaced it. He started to take a step forward, but Marcus Thorne, standing nearby, put a subtle hand on his arm, holding him back. "This new piece," Alina's voice dropped, becoming more intimate, more venomous, was acquired through deceit. It was paid for with stolen funds. Not stolen from a bank, but stolen from the heart of the original collection. Stolen trust. Stolen time. Stolen promises. The crowd was utterly silent, captivated. People were exchanging nervous glances. They knew this was no longer a metaphor. "This new acquisition," Alina went on, "liked to display itself. It loved to be seen in all the best places, wearing beautiful things bought with someone else's resources. It wore, for instance, a very specific piece of jewelry, a symbol of love, ironically. A Cartier love bracelet, let's say. A gift that was a copy of a promise made to another." She flicked her eyes to Chloe's wrist. Chloe instinctively pulled her hand back, a flash of pure panic in her eyes. The crowd followed Alina's gaze. A collective silent gasp seemed to ripple through the room. But a bracelet isn't enough, is it? It's circumstantial, Alina said, her voice dripping with scorn. For true authenticity, you need provenance. You need documentation. She reached into the small, elegant clutch she was carrying. She pulled out her phone. With a few taps, she projected a high-resolution image onto the large white wall behind the lectern, the very wall that had moments before been displaying a looping video of the gallery's artists. On the wall, for everyone to see, was the photograph she had taken of the purchase agreement for the bronze sculpture. And there, magnified to an enormous size, was Everett's handwriting. Chloe. Thanks for making this happen. A beautiful piece for a beautiful new beginning. J. The silence in the gallery was shattered. It was absolute, profound, and devastating. Every eye was on the wall, then on Everett, whose face had gone ashen white, and then on Chloe, whose face was a mask of disbelief and terror. Alina let the image hang there for 10 long seconds. Then she turned her full attention to the woman who had tried to steal her life. Chloe Jensen, Alina said, her voice ringing with the clarity of a bell. As the curator of this gallery, a place you claim is dedicated to truth and beauty. I have one question for you. This beautiful new beginning my husband wrote about, does it feel beautiful now? Does it feel authentic? She paused, her final blow delivered with the precision of a surgeon. And that very expensive sculpture, the fledgling's first flight, paid for by my family's assets to be a gift for my son. Where did you plan to display it? The silence that followed Alina's final question was not empty. It was a physical presence, a dense, heavy blanket that smothered all sound and movement in the gallery. The low hum of the ventilation system, previously unnoticed, now roared in the stillness. The clink of an ice cube in a forgotten glass sounded like a gunshot. For a full, agonizing 10 seconds, the entire New York art scene held its collective breath. Every eye was locked on the tableau of ruin, the damning words projected on the wall. The ashen face of the billionaire and the woman at the center of the storm, Chloe Jensen. Chloe stood as if she had been turned to stone, the silver of her gown seeming to lose its luster under the harsh glare of the projector. The confident smile she had worn all night was gone, replaced by a slack-jawed mask of pure terror. In her mind, a frantic, screaming denial was trying to form, but no sound would come out. She could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on her eyes that had admired her, envied her, desired her just minutes ago, now dissecting her with the cold curiosity of a lynch mob. The first sound to break the spell was a small, choked gasp from Chloe's own throat. Her mind, finally catching up to the reality of her public execution, began to scramble for a defense. No, she managed, her voice a thin, reedy whisper that barely carried past the first row of spectators. It's a misunderstanding. It's not what it looks like. The denial was so feeble, so utterly inadequate in the face of the colossal evidence on the wall that it was met with a new sound, a low, vicious murmur that rippled through the crowd. It was the sound of judgment being passed. People who had been air-kissing her cheek an hour before were now whispering her name with contempt, their expressions a cocktail of morbid glee and feigned pity. She could hear snippets sharp as shards of glass. The audacity! Right in front of his pregnant wife. Her career is over. Everett, who had been paralyzed by a tidal wave of shock and adrenaline, finally broke free. His image, his control, his entire world was slipping away. He stumbled forward, his movements clumsy, his face slick with sweat. Alina, he croaked, his voice thick with a desperation she had never heard before. He reached a hand toward her, an instinctive gesture to stop the bleeding. "Stop this. Please. We can talk about this at home." Alina turned her head slowly, regarding her husband, not with the pain of a betrayed wife, but with the detached clinical appraisal of a scientist studying a specimen under a microscope. Her gaze swept over him from his expensive disheveled suit to his panicked eyes, and in that one look, she dismissed him entirely. "Home." She repeated the single word, dripping with a contempt so profound it made several people flinch. "Are you referring to the penthouse at 15 Central Park West? The one whose purchase was finalized with funds from my family's trust? The home where I am currently preparing a nursery for my son?" She took a deliberate step back from his outstretched hand. "That home is no longer yours, Everick. You forfeited your right to call it that. You are no longer welcome in it." She turned her back on him completely, a gesture of absolute finality. It was as if he had ceased to exist. She faced the stunned crowd again, her posture radiating an untouchable, almost regal authority. "My sincerest apologies for this interruption to the evening's festivities," she announced, her voice ringing with clarity and control. "Please consider my family's 7-figure donation to this gallery and any other financial arrangements with its curator officially and immediately rescinded." She paused, letting the financial blow land. "I do hope you all enjoy the rest of the champagne. I imagine some of you—" Her eyes flickered one last time to Chloe. "Might find you suddenly have a great need for it." With that final devastating pronouncement, Alina turned and walked away from the lectern. She didn't flee. She made a calculated, graceful exit. The sea of guests parted for her, their awe and fear palpable. Men and women who commanded boardrooms and ran hedge funds shrank back, unwilling to meet the gaze of this woman who had just demonstrated such a terrifying capacity for strategic destruction. It was the sight of Alina's retreating back, poised, powerful, victorious, that finally shattered the last vestiges of Chloe's control. The spell was broken, and raw, primal hysteria erupted in its place. "He told me it was over." The shriek tore from Chloe's throat, raw and ragged, stripped of all its practiced sophistication. All heads swiveled back to her. "He lied to me. He said you were living separate lives. He said the marriage was a business arrangement. Nothing more." She whirled on Everick, her finger pointing, her face contorted with a mixture of rage and agony. "You told me you loved me. You told me we had a future, a beautiful new beginning. You wrote, you coward, you liar." The photographers, who had been frozen in a state of professional disbelief, suddenly erupted into a frenzy. The sound of their shutters was a percussive, predatory clicking. The flashes, a series of strobing explosions that illuminated Chloe's tear-streaked face and Everick's pathetic, trapped expression. They were capturing her complete and utter annihilation for the morning editions. Overwhelmed, humiliated, and utterly alone, Chloe's body gave out. With a gut-wrenching wail, she sank to her knees, the sound of her kneecaps hitting the polished concrete floor, audible in the sudden quiet. Her shimmering silver gown, a symbol of her supposed triumph, pooled around her like a shroud. The breakdown was absolute. She covered her face with her hands, her body convulsing with ugly, gasping sobs that echoed in the cathedral-like space of her ruined gallery. Outside, Alina stepped into the cool, clean air of the Chelsea night. The frantic sounds from within Chloe's hysterics. Everick's pathetic attempts at damage control, the machine gun fire of the cameras, were muffled as the heavy glass door swung shut behind her. A black Lincoln town car, summoned by Beatrice a half-hour earlier in a perfectly timed maneuver, pulled silently to the curb. The driver held the door. Before she got in, Alina paused. She reached up and unclasped the heavy Cartier diamond necklace Everick had given her as a pathetic preemptive apology. It felt cold and heavy in her palm. It was a lie, made tangible, a bribe for her silence. She looked at the glittering, flawless stones, and then at a grime-streaked public trash can chained to a lamp-post a few feet away. With a calm, deliberate motion, she let the necklace slide from her hand. It fell into the darkness of the bin, with a soft final clatter against a discarded bottle. A fortune in diamonds discarded like trash. It was her last act of severance, a quiet ritual of purification. As the car pulled smoothly into traffic, Alina leaned her head back against the cool leather. She didn't feel the thrill of victory or the satisfaction of revenge. She felt a profound and desolate clarity. The feeling of a surgeon after a long and brutal but necessary operation. The cancer had been excised, the wound was deep, and the recovery would be long. But she had done it. She had taken back her life, her story, her name. The rebuilding could now begin. The morning after the gala, New York City awoke to a feast of scandal. It was a story perfectly engineered for the digital age, wealth, sex, betrayal, and a very public immolation. The image of Chloe Jensen on her knees, a portrait of utter devastation, was the lead photo on every news site. The New York Post, in its typical gleeful savagery, ran the picture full page under the headline, "Billionaires Bust Up." The Times was more reserved, framing it as a shake-up in the city's philanthropic circles. But the implication was just as damning. On social media, the hashtag #GalaGore trended for 36 straight hours. Alina experienced the explosion not as a participant, but as a distant, dispassionate observer. She was already gone. By dawn, she was at her family's ancestral estate in Southampton, a sprawling, shingle-style mansion buffered from the world by acres of windswept dunes and ancient oak trees. Here the only sounds were the cry of gulls and the rhythmic crash of the Atlantic. Her mother, a woman of quiet fortitude and iron will, managed the flow of information. She answered the calls, deflected the press, and brought Alina tea and broth, speaking only of the baby. Alina didn't look at the news. She didn't need to. She had authored the story. She knew how it would read. There was no triumph in her, only a vast, cold emptiness where her marriage used to be. The rage that had fueled her for weeks had burned out, leaving behind the hard, clean clarity of ash. She walked the private beach, her hand resting on her belly, feeling the kicks of her son. The only truth that mattered. She had raised her life to the ground to protect him, to give him a foundation that wasn't built on lies. This quiet shore was the beginning of that foundation. For Everick, there was no such sanctuary. He woke up alone in the cavernous penthouse, the silence amplifying the frantic ringing of his phone. He stumbled out of bed, his head pounding the events of the night before, replaying in a sickening loop of shame and disbelief. A glance at his tablet confirmed his worst fears. His face, pale and horrified, was next to Chloe's weeping one. He was a meme, a punchline, a villain in a drama he could no longer control. His first dozen calls to Alina went straight to a disconnected number. His texts vanished into a digital void. He then called her mother, a woman he had always found intimidating. The conversation was brief. "She doesn't wish to speak with you, Everick," Mrs. Astor said, her voice like chipping ice. "All future communication will be handled by her counsel." The line went dead. Panic gave way to a desperate, clawing rage. How could she do this? To him? To them? He paced the marble floors of the home she had already spiritually abandoned, his world shrinking with every headline, every missed call. For Chloe Jensen, the fallout was not a distant storm, but a direct hit. The paparazzi were a permanent fixture outside her Soho apartment building. Her phone was a torrent of abuse and professional ruin. The first email, which arrived at 7:01 a.m., was from her gallery's primary investor, a man who had praised her vision just a week earlier. The message was terse, citing a moral turpitude clause in their contract, and immediately withdrawing all funding. Then came the artists one by one, their representatives sending polite but firm notices, severing their ties. Her landlord for the gallery space issued a notice of default on her lease. Within 48 hours, the Chloe Jensen Gallery, her entire identity existed only as a ghost on an abandoned website. She was a pariah radioactive. A week later, Everick was summoned to an emergency board meeting at the Winscott Innovations Tower. He walked into the 50th floor boardroom, a place where he was usually met with deference and awe, to find a dozen stone-faced board members waiting for him. There was no anger in their eyes, which was worse. There was only cold financial calculation. "The stock is down 12%, Everick," said the chairman, a grim elder statesman of finance. "The markets don't care about your personal life. They care about stability and judgment. You have shown a catastrophic lack of both." He wasn't fired. That would be too messy an admission of defeat. Instead, he was strongly advised to take an indefinite leave of absence to focus on his family. It was a public neutering. He was stripped of his operational control, his parking space, his access card. As he left the building, he saw employees whispering, averting their eyes. He had become a ghost in his own empire. The legal battle that followed was brief and brutal. Everick hired Silas Lynch, a lawyer known for his scorched earth tactics. Lynch's first letter to Alina's counsel was full of bluster, threatening to paint her as emotionally unstable and vindictive. Beatrice Shaw's reply arrived by courier the next day. It was elegantly simple. It contained a formal petition for divorce, citing the prenuptials infidelity clause. Attached to it was a single glossy printout of the New York Post cover. At the bottom, Beatrice had written in black ink, Exhibit A. Lynch, undeterred, fired back that a tabloid photo was not indisputable proof. Beatrice's final response was even shorter. A single-sentence email sent to Lynch's personal address. "We look forward to deposing Miss Jensen under oath." That was the kill shot. The prospect of Chloe Jensen on a witness stand, forced to recount every detail of the affair for public record. The hotel rooms, the art advisory payments, the gifts, the promises would create a second, even more damaging media firestorm. It would be a circus from which Everick's reputation and the company's stock price might never recover. Silas Lynch called Everick. "It's over," he said, all the fight gone from his voice. "Give her whatever she wants." 2 months after the gala, as the city's heat gave way to the crispness of early autumn, Alina gave birth in a private wing of a Southampton hospital. She held her son, a tiny, perfect creature with a fuzz of dark hair, and felt the last of the cold ash within her wash away. She named him Theodore Astor. Theodore, gift of God, and Astor, her name, her family, her strength. He would carry a legacy of resilience, not scandal. The divorce was settled with quiet, ruthless efficiency. Alina's demands were non-negotiable. She received the penthouse at 15 Central Park West, a tactical acquisition she intended to sell, cleansing herself of its memories. More importantly, she took a significant non-voting share of Winscott Innovations. It wasn't just about the money. It was about power. It tethered her to the company, permanently ensuring that for the rest of his life, a portion of Everett's success would flow directly to the family he abandoned. It was a constant, galling reminder of his loss, etched into his corporate filings. Everett was left a man hollowed out. He was still a billionaire, but he was diminished, a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties. He eventually returned to his role as CEO, but the magic was gone. He was cautious, scrutinized, haunted. His visitation rites with Theodore were a bi-weekly exercise in sterile formality, supervised by a nanny in the grand living room of a home that felt alien to him. He would hold his son, this small stranger who carried his features but not his name, and feel the profound, unbridgeable chasm he had created. Alina conversely remade herself. A year after the birth, she sold the penthouse for a record-breaking sum and bought a magnificent sun-drenched brownstone on the Upper East Side. She re-emerged into public life not as a Winscott, but as Alina Astor, a formidable power in her own right. She established the Astor Foundation, a charity dedicated to supporting single mothers and funding female artists who lacked institutional support. It was her final, perfect act of defiance, transforming the very tools of her betrayal into instruments of empowerment for other women. She was photographed at benefits, poised and radiant sometimes, with Theodore on her hip. She never spoke of the scandal. She never had to. In the ruins of her marriage, Alina had built an empire of her own, one founded not on polished surfaces and deceit, but on unshakable authentic strength. She had taken a story of humiliation and rewritten it as an epic of survival. And so the curtain falls on the Winscott, a story of love, lies, and the ultimate public revenge. Alina Winscott proved that a woman's pain can be forged into a weapon, and that a reputation once shattered can never truly be repaired. She didn't just win a divorce, she won the war, for her own narrative emerging not as a victim, but as an icon of strength. But what do you think? Was Alina's public takedown a brilliant act of empowerment or a cruel spectacle that went too far? Was Chloe a willing homewrecker or another victim of Everett's manipulation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, if you were captivated by this story of real-life drama. Make sure to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a good story, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel. We bring you the most compelling dramatic stories every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming next.